Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
A scared, angry little man. He thinks it's all over now, but he's wrong. For Rocky Valentine, it's just the beginning.
A Nice Place to Visit is episode 28 of the first season of The Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone is an American science fiction horror TV series, and it ran between 1959 and 1964. Every episode is a standalone story, and it involves characters finding themselves in a disturbing or supernatural situation. The events that occurred in each episode were described as entering the Twilight Zone, and they often had a twist ending. This show was kind of like the Goosebumps or Black Mirror of its day. In the episode A Nice Place to Visit, we follow a man called Rocky Valentine. Rocky Valentine is a character who blames society for all his faults. He starts a life of crime at a young age and he constantly sins throughout his years. However, his life of crime catches up to him and he gets killed by the police during a robbery. Rocky wakes up in the afterlife to be greeted by his supposed guardian angel called Pip. Pip gives him everything he wants. He gets all the money he could ever imagine. He gets a lavish penthouse suite, the woman of his dreams, and the ability to succeed in anything he does. Rocky finally has everything he wants right at his fingertips. Rocky then realises that the abundance of everything has just ruined the fun. There's no stakes in anything. There's no sense of accomplishment. Life for Rocky Valentine has quickly become incredibly dull. This episode asked the viewer the question, is heaven even a good concept? Sure, it's good on paper. It's a utopia where there's all your loved ones, everything you want, no crime and especially no suffering. But in the real world, everyone knows the old saying of be careful what you wish for. If you had everything you could ever desire at your fingertips, life would feel purposeless. It's comparable to cheating in a video game. I mean, sure, it's fun for a while, but there's just no sense of progression. It just gets boring. However, nobody wants to live in poverty. Nobody wants an unsuccessful life. Most people would become wealthy if they could. So we have a bit of a dilemma here, don't we? Can there really be too much of a good thing? The crime genre in media has resulted in some of the best lessons of just having too much. You can see it in the Twilight Zone episode, but some of the best examples are from the two Tonys of media. Antonio Montana is a Cuban refugee who moves to America in hopes of living the American dream. Through a life of crime he rises to the top, but he's deeply unhappy. He has everything that he could ever imagine, but he's lonely. And the same things could be said about mob boss Tony Soprano. Tony Soprano has a massive house, a loving family, and he's also incredibly wealthy. But at the end of the day he's all alone. His terrible actions he's committed in his life caused him to have panic attacks, so he ends up seeing a therapist. He talks to the therapist about a family of ducks that flies into his pool. They stay in his backyard for a while, but when they eventually fly away, Tony is upset. In the show they say that this represents Tony being paranoid of losing his family. But I think they also represent that these ducks are able to fly away at any point, and they can travel to anywhere that they want to go to. But Tony's trapped in the mafia. Tony is trapped in a mansion of a prison cell. He's the king of New Jersey, but at the end of the day, was it even worth it? If anyone took a small glance at what the two Tonys have, if you didn't assume that they were criminals, you would think they've won the lottery. Poor man's tax is another way people describe playing the lottery. You're never going to win, but for the lucky few that actually do, it's often more of a curse than a blessing. 70% of lottery winners end up bankrupt, meaning that they probably end up worse than they were before. Jack Whittaker is one of the most well-known cases of the downsides of winning the lottery. Jack Whittaker already had a net worth of $17 million, but after winning $314.9 million in the Powerball, he was actually bankrupt within 5 years. His uninsured house ended up burning down in 2016. And he ended up passing away in 2020 after a long illness. So while winning the lottery is indeed an extreme case, it's a good reminder in life that even if you have everything, you still may not be happy. I class myself as a U/tuber, so I don't really identify myself as going/outside anymore. Why venture to the outside world when I can have everything I could ever want at my fingertips? But in all seriousness, the sense of adventure has truly left me when it comes down to exploring my own city. Growing up I lived in the countryside, and often me and my friends would just explore the local villages in hopes of finding something cool. And it kind of started that way when I moved to the city. But I think the internet has kind of ruined it in a way. What's the point of walking around looking for a bar or a restaurant, when I can find the exact type of food I like with a high star rating within seconds online? It highly dissuades you from even considering other choices, because it's so much different in the real world. In a whim you could decide to try a different type of food out and about just because you're really hungry. And you know, the other place that you try which has bad reviews online could end up actually being quite good. And on one of the rare days that I decided to go to the outside world, it did make me realise how much Google Maps has ruined the sense of adventure. I knew exactly where I wanted to go and the easiest and quickest route to get there. And this is a side note from the main point of the video, but I think there's a big reason why young people don't go outside anymore apart from the phones. And I think it's the fact that most places aren't built for pedestrians in this day and age. I felt like I was going to get ran over about 20 times when I was out there, and I was only out for a few hours. I mean, in today's world, what's even the point of going outside in the first place? DoorDash, Just Eat and Deliveroo are just some of the many food ordering apps online, and most restaurants are now on these apps in some form. You can just get the food delivered to you right on your doorstep. When I was growing up, the only takeaway place I liked for miles was my local fish and chip shop. Yeah, very British, I know. It wasn't often that we went to get food from there, but when we did it was special. It felt like an event. Something as small as going to collect a takeaway actually meant something. It wasn't just about the food, it was the anticipation, the travelling to get there, the waiting in the queue and the interaction with the staff. Just about everything in regards to the experience was extremely memorable. I've long since had that takeaway and I moved away from the countryside a couple of years ago. But the overall memories I had there are way more meaningful than any Just Eat I could ever order. Cause in some ways we're spoilt for choice now. And is it just me, or often when you're on these apps you struggle to decide what to have? I've probably spent upwards of an hour on these apps before just choosing what to eat. It does seem asinine in a way to complain about something that people from the past would only see as a positive thing, but hindsight is 2020, I guess. And this is the same situation with streaming. Everyone has come across the issue of the abundance of films to pick. This always seems to happen when you've just made dinner, and your food is just sitting there in front of you getting cold as you're struggling to find a movie that everyone likes. But like going out to get food, this wasn't always the way. Back in the day, you wouldn't have all the choice in the world. In fact, most of the time you would only have one movie. Like going out to get a takeaway. Going out to get a specific movie felt like an event. I remember when I was a kid, I always wanted to get into the Star Wars films. So one day we drove into town just to get the movies. And while the first movie rental shop we checked didn't have the movie, another one thankfully did. Sure, it took a lot longer to sort out than just streaming it, but it made it more special and more memorable. Because I don't think I would have remembered my first experience watching it if we didn't go out to get it. You know, there's a specific memory that many people cherish about Blockbuster. And this was going to the store on a Friday night and carefully picking out a movie, and then getting a takeaway on the way home. All of this included physical interaction. And again, although you're consuming media, at least you're getting out of the house in some way beforehand. And that one movie was the entertainment for the night. You had no other choice. You can just exit the movie on the app and pick another. And this gave the sole movie more importance to movie night. Often people would pick a movie just by the cover of it, and not by the reviews. And sadly the internet has kind of ruined that aspect of it. People now often judge what they're going to watch solely based on reviews. And even I'll admit that I've done that many times. Because honestly, why waste your time on a movie that is critically hated, when you could just watch a movie that you know you'll probably at least like? But again, in some ways it removes part of the fun. As all of you know watching this video, the critics or general consensus of a film isn't always right. Throughout the years, I know all of you have enjoyed a critically panned movie. I mean, you guys always let me know when you think I've got it wrong. And to be fair, at the same time, while like movies aren't always good either, I've had many run-ins with well-liked movies that I just didn't connect with. And again, that is what made going out to pick a movie much more special. Normally there was way less stakes on the line. Your expectations were that it was hopefully going to entertain you on a serviceable level at least, as it was much harder to check if people liked the movie or not. So if it turned out to be really good, it was a nice surprise. But if it was really bad, at least you weren't expecting much. It's kind of like when people say going out for New Year's Eve is often a disappointment. And that's often because there is so much expectations around it that it normally doesn't live up to the hype. But anyway, this is why I still love going to the cinema. It feels like an event. My local cinema often shows random films I've never heard of. And I like it that way because I have no idea what to expect. I also have to go out my way to see the movie at a specific time, and this gives the movie more importance. But you know, for all the other benefits, I still enjoy watching films at home, because even with a semi-decent setup, you can have a pretty good cinema experience at the comfort of your own sofa. So because of this, I recently decided to try and get more into physical media. I walked into one of the only physical media stores that are left in the UK. I wanted to see Steven Spielberg's Minority Report, and this is because it looked like a really interesting sci-fi movie. It was really cool looking through all the movies and categories to find the Blu-ray, and it was nice to actually have a chat with the staff there rather than just scrolling on Netflix for hours. The needed human interaction in this day and age gives people a little sense of community, something I think that is really missing in today's world. A reason why physical media is good is also because that not every single movie is on a streaming service. Out of the many different streaming platforms on the market, there are plenty of movies that leave the platforms or are straight up just never on there. And even if the movie is on one of the streaming services, nobody in their right mind is paying for every single one of them. Minority Report is one of those films that fit into this category. It is on a streaming service called Now TV. But in the years of knowing about streaming services, I genuinely don't think I've known even one person who's had Now TV. And what's the point of paying their monthly fee when you just want to watch one movie? For many reasons, physical media looks better than streaming even right now. So for just on quality alone, the Blu-ray disc will always look better. The only thing you need, I guess, is a DVD or Blu-ray player. And if you have any modern console lying around, you'll be able to play them just fine. The PS5 actually supports 4K disc, which is great honestly. So when I got back home later on in the day, I went to the TV and put on the film, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't the best movie in the world, but it kept me invested the whole time, and it also had quite a few cool ideas. And even if I absolutely hated it, I would have always had the choice to trade it in and get a different movie. Watching movies on these modern formats is great. And you know, for all the slack I give streaming services, the picture can still be pretty good. But again, it begs the question, is all of this just too much? In the past 20 years or so, the advancements of technology seem to have gotten harder to notice. Remember when the upgrades in the iPhones were so noticeable? And this made it feel like an event, but now I can't tell the difference between each release. You really have to dig into the specifics to find anything different, and normally it's just something like the camera's a little better. The same thing happened with gaming, of course. Like the third generation moving into the 16-bit world had such a clear difference. Or in the fifth generation when gaming moved into 3D graphics. It must have been mind-blowing at the time to see that. Even the jump from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2 graphics was mind-blowing. And although these hyper-realistic modern games do look great, I haven't really been blown away since the PS4 days. This brings us to the movie formats. VHS, DVD and Blu-ray all have such a different distinguishable level of picture quality. VHS being on analog tape means that the picture quality diminishes over time, sort of like the same thing as a vinyl record being worn out. The picture quality was unique, to put it nicely, but the actual resolution was about 320 pixels. DVDs were a massive step up, and it really helped that they were stored on a digital format. The quality was now 480p, and these factors resulted in a huge step up from VHS. And then we come to Blu-ray, which has a picture resolution of 1080p, which is now known as your standard HD video. Each of these jumps in technology were incredibly noticeable, and even I remember being blown away the first time I saw a Blu-ray disc. So at this point we're now at the latest form of physical media, which is the 4K disc. Now apart from the main factor of streaming, there's another glaring issue that has caused this format to not sell that well. And I think it's because people are just happy with Blu-ray. And at the end of the day, 4K doesn't look that much better. For all the CGI heavy action films, the effects are only rendered at 1080p. So the 4K disc is kind of just an upscale. The 4K discs do have HDR however, which results in way more vivid colours, and that's one of its main selling points. But not everyone has a TV that can utilise that feature. Movies with little to no effects utilise this format a whole lot better, and the image quality can look amazing. But still in my eyes, the Blu-ray disc isn't that far behind, and it's definitely not the same jump as, say, VHS to DVD. I'm now going to ask you guys another question. Has the change in technology over the years ruined some movies? Now let me explain. Some people argue that the lower quality of films resulted in things like horror films feeling a lot scarier on videotape. The lower quality of the tape results in some shoddy effects actually looking okay, and the analogue look of VHS looks so much more unique compared to the other digital formats. It kind of has an eerie vibe to it. So these factors arguably create a more atmospheric experience. Although there's been all of these technological advancements, in some ways the limitations is what made these films more enjoyable. It's also been stated that smaller scale films have fared a lot better on the home release, and that's because there wasn't a grand presentation of them like there was in the cinema. There's also another argument on the other side of the coin, and this is the fact that it's bad that the 4K disc look better than the original theatrical release. 35mm film reels have the resolution compared to 1080p, so back in the day that's how your parents were experiencing movies. The 4K discs however are in 4K, so you actually see way more than you were supposed to back in the day. This does result in a great picture and a lot of film grain, and this is something that people either love or hate, but at the end of the day it's not how you were supposed to see the film. I do think that these are interesting points, and I definitely get the horror film opinion more. But you know, at the end of the day, in whatever way you're watching a movie, whether it's physical media, streaming, or even in a cinema, if the film is good, the film is good. It may improve it a little bit, but it wouldn't make a terrible film that much better. In a topic that I didn't mention in my censorship video, censoring media and the scarcity of it in some ways makes it more sought after. Video nasties is a term that is in reference to a lot of old horror films being banned in the UK on VHS. This happened in the 80s and this is because they were apparently too violent. These films made it to video because there was a loophole at the time which meant VHS tapes bypassed the review rating. At the time only theatrical releases would get an age rating from the BBFC. So this resulted in these banned VHS tapes being dealt under the counter. And the demand to see these films increased massively just because of the scarcity of them. It must have been such a novelty to get a hold of one of these films back in the day. And sadly I think due to the horrors that are available on the internet, people are now majorly desensitized to these type of movies. So what does this all mean? Well, I think it shows that media, technology and society itself are all imperfect. It's easier in some ways to claim that the grass is always greener and wish for a simpler time, as I think that if we did go back we would eventually miss the tools that make our life easier. Removing all of society's technical advancements is not the answer, not in the slightest, but something does need to be changed, because the abundance of media has resulted in particularly young people being desensitized to everything. When you have access to the entire world at the palm of your hands, there's no wonder or excitement anymore. The sense of community and the human interaction side of things have almost been forgotten about in the past 20 years. Everyone is addicted to their phones, and people expect things to be given to them instantly on a silver platter. Nobody really needs each other anymore like they used to. Like everything else in life, I guess most things are okay as long as it's in moderation. But the issues that so many people face today is just the fact that they can't strike that balance. Remember how I mentioned how the Twilight Zone was known for its twist endings? Well, there's more to that Twilight Zone episode than I initially left on. The episode has held up so incredibly well in my opinion because of the parallels of today's youth. Rocky Valentine has all he could ever want, yet of course he's unhappy. But the twist ending wasn't that Rocky Valentine was unhappy with having everything he could ever want. The twist was that Rocky Valentine was actually in hell.
We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives.